Hello everyone and welcome to a new episode of the MoeGamer podcast. I'm Pete Davison from MoeGamer.net and I'm joined once again by my good friend Chris Kasky from MrGilderPixels.com, and we're both coming at you live from the midst of lockdown once again. So how are you holding up being locked in your house, Chris?
Being locked up in my house with Persona 5 and FF7 Remake, I think I'm managing okay.
Yeah,
I'm in
exactly
lockdown.
how I'm feeling as well.
I'm in lockdown with Ann Takamaki and Tifa. I could get worse.
Yeah, exactly how I'm feeling. Like my wife is just starting to go a little bit stir crazy now because her day job's pretty dead as well. But with the nature of it, she sort of has to stay logged in and paying attention. Whereas my day job, when it's dead, I can just go off and play on my Switch. So that's it's pretty sweet.
You're very lucky. I don't know. We don't talk much about like what we actually do. Like I'm a supply manager. So right now I'm in charge of my company's efforts to source COVID-19 supplies so our manufacturing workforce can continue to function. So I'm just chewing my nails off like 9 to 10 hours a day trying to find masks and hand sanitizer and cleansing wipes. And so like my day, I'd be isolating even if I wasn't like legally mandated to do so, because like by the time 5 o'clock rolls around I can hardly function. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I am having pretty much the exact opposite situation right now, so it's rather pleasant, actually.
It surely sounds it.
But anyway. Alright, okay, so the plan for today is we're going to follow our usual three-part format. We're going to start with some news, although there hasn't been a ton of it going on recently, largely thanks to the pandemic situation causing a lot of people to shut down or either sort of slow things down or that sort of thing. But there's a few things we can talk about. Then we'll follow that with the usual talk of what we've been playing recently. And our main topic for today, with the recent release of Final Fantasy VII Remake at the time of recording, we thought we'd talk about remakes in general and have a bit of a chat about some of the different approaches that people can take to them, what's good about them, and I'm sure there'll be some Final Fantasy VII talk in there as well. So, alright, let's kick off with some news. So, it's been a little while since we recorded, so we got some stuff that is going back to the start of April 2020 here. So first one I've got is that City Connection, which is the company that now owns all of the Jaleco IPs, they've actually opened up a licensing catalogue site for all of the Jaleco IPs for other creators to contact them and make use of things. And so there's a full list there of all of the things that they currently own. So if anyone wants to do a project with any of those IPs, they can now easily get in touch with City Connection and license them, which is pretty exciting because there's a lot of IPs there that have been dormant for a very long time, and it'd be really interesting to see some people do something with them, even if it's just like a port or a re-release of certain things. But the possibility of new stuff based around Jaleco IPs is certainly very, very interesting to me.
There's a screenshot in like the official header of Phalanx, and I got a little tingle.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff here. So some more well known than others. Of course, my priority is Rodland and Soldam, which are both on there. Soldam's obviously had a recent re-release on Switch, and I think it's out on PS4 now as well. Rodland, I'd love to see just an arcade archives release of. That's all I need. I just want to play the original arcade version again.
Yeah,
that'll be fine. But then there's a bunch of other cool stuff in there as well. There's a lot of shoot 'em ups that Jaleco did. There's EDF Earth Defense Force, but not that Earth Defense Force. Which is actually already available on the Nintendo Switch Online SNES app, if I remember correctly.
I think so.
There's obviously Game Paradise and Game Tengoku, which was recently re-released with the port for PS4, and that came to Switch as well, didn't it? I think. Is that right?
I think so.
Okay. If there isn't a Switch port now, I think they were working on one. All sorts of stuff. So some interesting stuff there for sure. But nothing specific to share yet, but it is now open for people to to browse through and say, oh, I'd like to make a new Rodland, please.
I was gonna say, now you'll finally be able to live your dream of creating a romance visual novel where you have to choose between the girl from Rodland or the girl from City Connection.
Fantastic. All right, moving along then. Rogue Legacy, which is the game credited with creating the term roguelite, is getting a sequel. So they've revealed that it exists and also shown a few bits of concept art and some screenshots as well. So far, it's looking fairly kind of similar in appearance and tone to the previous one. So there's this sort of hand-drawn, cartoony style going on. Yeah,
the big difference here is they've ditched the pixel art. So now it's it's actually like a hand-drawn animated style. It's kind of reminiscent of that beautiful Wonder Boy remake that Lizard Cube did.
Oh yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah. So and again, it's all sort of based on generational gameplay. So you sort of pass things on from generation to generation, and each new generation of character has their own abilities and stuff. So yeah, if you enjoyed Rogue Legacy 1, it looks like 2 is going to provide more of the same, but more so. So that's cool.
As a sequel should.
Exactly. All right, next story we've got is that apparently the Korean ratings board for Nintendo Switch has a listing for SNK Gals Fighters, which is the precursor to SNK Heroines, which came out a while back, and was actually a Neo Geo Pocket Color exclusive. Very fondly regarded by those who played it, though. So, yeah, we don't really know anything about what's happening with this at all. But, yeah, it has been rated for Switch in Korea, whatever that means.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's weird because there's kind of been this undercurrent of, like, Neo Geo Pocket games on Switch.
Yeah, a lot of them have been sort of coming as pre-order bonuses and stuff, haven't they?
Yeah, so, like, they did it with Samurai Showdown. Like, if you got the Samurai Showdown or Samurai Spirits on the Switch, you got a digital version of, like, one of the Neo Geo Pocket versions. So there's a little bit of precedent for this, and it's exciting because Gals Fighters is just so much fun. There's just something there's like the sprites in the Neo Geo Pocket fighting games specifically have such a very distinct style to them. Like, they're really charming. Yeah, I know it's a very charming game, and I believe Kimimi, who we've mentioned a couple of times on this podcast as well, she's written a few things about it, or certainly squeed about it on Twitter a few times as well. So, I'd be up for having a look at that, whatever form it takes, because I know it's sort of a bit of an underappreciated classic, much like sort of the Neo Geo Pocket Color itself, really. So. God, I cannot wait for Analog's handheld system. Because it's you're gonna be able to buy an adapter to play Neo Geo Pocket, and then play it on the TV. Yeah,
that will be sweet.
What I wouldn't give to be able to burn through Biomotor Unitron again. Which, for those who are not familiar, it's basically like Armored Core plus Pokemon.
Oh, nice.
So, like, you go through, like, dungeons with your, like, cute robot that you, like, customize the legs, arms, body, and head of, and, like, buy parts for, and, like...
Yeah.
It's the best.
Nice. All right, well, we'll keep an eye out for what's going on with that then. Okay, moving on. Phantasy Star Online 2, at the time of recording, is actually released on Xbox One. It released on April the 15th of 2020. So you can now download and play that in North America on Xbox One. Although apparently there is a fairly simple workaround if you're outside North America and you want to play the Xbox One version. The Windows 10 version is apparently launching in May. So they haven't given a specific date for that yet, but it is coming in May 2020. So there's that to look forward to.
So this could theoretically be the last you ever hear from me. When the Windows 10, because when the Windows 10 version drops, I'm donezo.
Yeah. They haven't given any news about other platforms yet, but they did say a while back that they are planning on releasing it on other versions as well. So, And I believe with the way Phantasy Star Online 2 works, you just have a Sega account, so it should be cross-platform, I think.
This is the hope.
So hopefully, if you want to start playing immediately, you should hopefully be able to play on the Windows 10 version and then transfer over to PS4 or Switch when those versions do finally drop as well, assuming you want to anyway.
I was going to say, I like that you used or instead of and.
Yeah. All right. Okay, continuing on, RetroBit is apparently making a alternative Dreamcast controller in late 2020. So what they've done with this is they've redesigned the D-pad for the Dreamcast. They've given it a new analog stick. They're doing wired and wireless models, and they've made a 6-button layout instead of the 4-button layout of the original. They've also moved the triggers slightly, so that presumably it's a bit more comfortable. I mean, it will remain to be seen what this feels like in your hands, because it's still got that sort of distinctive Dreamcast controller shape, which is not the most comfortable, but perhaps the different layout of the buttons and the D-pad and the analog stick and stuff will make it a little bit more comfortable to use. So
yeah, I'm very excited about this. Because RetroBit has an official Sega license. So
that's cool.
So RetroBit's controllers are official Sega controllers. I just ordered their Saturn controller, this like a special edition box set that comes in a nice like clamshell case that includes the a USB and Saturn wireless adapters, so you can use it on either. It's
that's nice.
I'm very excited about that because it's gonna I'll use the USB on my computer for MAME fighting games, and I'll finally be able to more comfortably use my Saturn instead of having to put it on the coffee table and run the cables across my living room. And it's the same with the Dreamcast. I'm very excited to be able to finally have a wireless solution that works. And if people don't like the shape of the Dreamcast controller, there's another company out there called Retro Fighters. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. Their whole deal is they've devised like a pretty standard controller that looks like what you expect a controller to look like. And then they just kind of port it to other systems. So like specifically they do it for systems that have controllers. So like there's a N64 version, there's a Dreamcast version, and you can get this very specific standard it almost looks a bit like the what am I trying to say? It looks a lot like the Switch Pro controller.
Yeah.
But you can play it on the N64 or the Dreamcast, and it actually has, like, the Dreamcast one has the appropriate slots for the memory card and the VMU built right in. So there's a lot of really cool third-party controller options out there these days. Yeah,
definitely. It's worth mentioning as well for those not familiar with the RetroBit. When I say an alternative Dreamcast controller, this is not a controller for modern consoles that is like a Dreamcast controller. This is a controller for the Dreamcast, so which is cool. Yeah, it's really neat to see that there are companies making new controllers for classic systems. So
I mean, it does remain to be seen if they might do what they did with the Saturn. I'm not sure if the wireless version is going to be 24 gigahertz or Bluetooth, but the Saturn controllers they released, there was also a USB version available, and like I mentioned, you can get a Saturn wireless dongle or a USB wireless dongle. So although it was made for the Saturn in mind, you can play it on anything that's USB compatible.
Yeah.
They also did the same with the Genesis 6-button pads, officially licensed. It's really, really cool work they do with Sega.
Cool. All right, moving along then. NES America has announced that they're bringing Giraffe and Annika to the West in August of 2020. That's coming for Switch and PS4. Now, this is an independently developed adventure game with some really lovely art. It's got sort of cel-shaded style characters and sort of hand-drawn comic style cutscenes and some really nice backgrounds and stuff. And yeah, it's sort of based around cute animal characters and rhythm-based battles. So that covers both of our tastes in one fell swoop there.
there's a sassy antagonist witch with purple hair. So
Yep. Yeah, so this looks like a lot of fun. There's a trailer up now as well that I'll include in the video version of this podcast so you can have a look as well. But yeah, this looks really nice. There are going to be physical copies as well. NIS America have been really good at doing sort of physical copies of smaller scale, more niche interest stuff as well. So it may well be sort of one of those ones where they do like a sort of limited run of an affordable collector's edition, like they've done with a lot of their other games. In fact, it does sound like they're doing this. It's called a Musical Mayhem edition, which includes the game, a set of 3 patches, as in physical patches, not game patches, an art book, and a soundtrack CD. So, yeah, we'll look out for that in August of 2020.
Yeah, I'm really fond, like, I don't love rhythm games that are just rhythm games, but I love, like, adventure games or role-playing games that have rhythm game elements. Like, I love when the rhythm is tied, like, the rhythm game is tied to, like, the other stuff. It's like, essentially, like, the combat, like, whenever there's a conflict in this game, it's a rhythm game.
Yeah. You're sort of dodging things to the rhythm and that sort of thing. So, like, enemies are firing shots at you and you're dodging from side to side in time with the music and so on. So, neat.
Really looking forward to it.
Okay, next thing coming along is, this is relatively old news at the time of recording, but the PlayStation 5 controller has been revealed. It's called DualSense, and it kind of looks like kind of a cross between an Xbox controller and a DualShock controller to me. I know a few people have sort of been a bit down on the design of this, but it looks like it might be sort of quite good and quite comfortable.
Yeah.
I don't know what you feel about it.
I feel that it looks like the PlayStation 5 might be white, and that's all I can think about. Because I am obsessed with collecting white consoles.
Oh, nice.
It's like one of my things. So if this controller is any indication, I think all I can think about. One of the things that's interesting to me is like reading between the lines is they've moved the light bar. You know, the light bar is on the rear of the rear or the top of the PlayStation 4 controller. Yeah. And the original thinking behind that was so the camera can track it for motion stuff.
Yeah.
And like 4 games used it when like the PS4 launched, and like all those stupid gimmicks, everyone forgot about it. So they've moved the light bar to 2 strips on the side of the touchpad on the DualSense controller. So it looks like they've pretty much abandoned that notion that like we're going to use the forward-facing light bar as like a motion tracking like camera thing. So I just think it's interesting how like subtly like they've abandoned that.
Yeah, that's interesting though, because that was used quite a bit in VR games. Yes. And they've said that PlayStation VR is going to be used with PlayStation 5 as well. So I don't know if that means that you have to use Move controllers or if you'll have to use a DualShock 4 with it. But that's interesting from that perspective, certainly. There's haptic feedback in this and adaptive triggers, which means that sort of it can adjust the tension of the triggers according to what you're supposedly doing with them. I've never experienced that for myself, but I know that there's some controllers out there that do that already. But it's an interesting thing to incorporate into a controller. They've continued the ongoing trend of start and select no longer being fashionable buttons to have on a controller, and we've now got 3 lines and 3 lines facing outwards.
Start and select.
There was a great post on Twitter the other day. It's like you hand that controller to a non-gamer and ask them to press one of those buttons. What do you tell them?
Yeah. So also, like, I don't like to be negative, but man, this D-pad looks like it's gonna be ass. Like, I mean, now it's beautiful, it's sleek, and it makes sense aesthetically with the controller. But man, oh man, like everyone gonna have to be buying fighting pads. Like this thing is gonna be like that is a terrible looking D-pad.
Yeah, I've never had as much of a problem with the PlayStation D-pads as some people do, but yeah, I know some people really don't like them, especially for fighting games and stuff. So
yeah, well, they're great. It's the PlayStation D-pads are serviceable for games where D-pad performance isn't important.
Yeah.
Is the best way to phrase it. It's not a terrible D-pad, but as I was mentioned earlier, I've got a bee in my bonnet about collecting Guilty Gear games right now, and it's not the official PlayStation 5 controller is not a friend I would choose to bring bring along on a Guilty Gear session. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's looking interesting. I would certainly be curious to get one of those in my hands. All right, continuing on, we've got some more news about Streets of Rage 4, which is actually out very soon at the time of recording, I believe, isn't it?
Yeah, the 30th officially.
So yes. So there was a date. There was a date leaked a little while back, which was April the 23rd, but apparently that was not final or confirmed. So yeah, April the 30th. So day after my birthday. So I will enjoy that when my limited run copy arrives.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah, so the latest news to go with this is that it's incorporating original pixel art versions of the characters from their games with their movesets and abilities intact, which means that there's a total of 17 different playable characters in this game, which is enormous for a brawler.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, and there's also the opportunity to switch the background music of the first 2 Streets of Rage games as well, which is neat. So if you enjoy some sort of classic 90s Yuzo Koshiro beats, then you'll have the opportunity to do that.
And if you don't, I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. Very interested to see how that turns out. It's certainly looking very nice so far, so I'm sure we'll have more to say once the actual game is out. All right, continuing on. A little while back, Sabotage Studio, who are the people who made what was it? Was it The Messenger?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, the guys who made The Messenger announced a turn-based RPG called Sea of Stars, which is basically a prequel to The Messenger, isn't it? Isn't it like sort of several hundred years before that, but it's got some ties to it, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's right.
But sort of the big news that's come out on this recently at the time of recording is that Yasunori Mitsuda, who is the composer for Chrono Trigger, Xenogears, and Shadow Hearts. I didn't realise he did Shadow Hearts as well.
Either did I.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, he's joining the main composer, Eric W. Brown, in developing some original music for the game. So there should be some sort of excellent Mitsuda Chrono Trigger style beats in there. And the interesting thing about this is that it sounds like he sort of approached them because he saw the trailers and the and sort of the artwork for the game, and his quote is, "Without knowing exactly why I want to write music for this game is the feeling I had while seeing it convey the nostalgic golden age of the 90s. Although there are still many games being released with this classic style, I don't think players are satisfied with just nostalgia. As seen in their previous game, by adding new systems and ideas to classic formulas, Sabotage Studio breathes fresh new air into their work." Yeah, so this is very exciting if you're a fan of his previous work. And again, if you're not, we probably don't want to know you.
Indeed. This game, this is another one of those Kickstarters where I like to just put the page up and watch the numbers climb.
Yeah.
Like in real time, because the goal was $94,000.
Yeah.
So just short of $100,000. It is now at 1.142 mil.
Nice.
So, people love The Messenger.
Yeah. I've seen lots of sort of positive words about it, and this sort of lots of YouTubers have done playthroughs of it and enthusiastic reviews and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a pretty widely beloved game from what I've seen.
And it needs to be said that it doesn't need to be said because by the time this is published, the 2 hours to go on the campaign will have expired. But there was a physical buy-in option.
Yeah.
So I leapt on that. But I'm sure Limited Run will press a non backer edition at some point later.
Yes,
they've established that relationship now.
Yeah. Okay, continuing on, we've got a new dungeon crawler from Experience is coming in June of 2020. It's called Yomi wo Saku Hana, which something dark something flowers, something like that. That's the limit of my Japanese at the minute. But yeah, this is a dystopian dungeon RPG, and it's I kind of like the art in this. I mean, cool art in Experience stuff is kind of a given, but this is a bit of a shift from their normal anime inspired style. This is really sort of I don't know. Yeah, how would you describe this?
It's like sepia toned, and because the whole thing is that it's got like an old school like component to it, where it's like old timey. According to the description, you become an employee of a company that manages underknots, which are underground miners that are hired by illegal means. So it has like almost like a, I don't want to say like steampunky, but like, or like old westerny, like there's a kid in the screenshots with a pith helmet on.
Yeah.
Like that's the kind of like look it's going for. And like the character portraits are like pictures that are like in the battle sequences, it's pictures and there's tape on the corners. Like they're like tape, it's like tape. Like this whole thing has this very like old-timey, like ring-a-ding-ding like feeling to it, with like the sepia tones and like the washed color palette. And I just can't wait to see like aesthetically how this carries out through like the rest of the game.
Yeah, this is kind of sort of giving me a kind of almost Lovecraftian vibe. A lot of Lovecraft themed games kind of have this kind of aesthetic, especially with the sort of the old time photographs and the sepia tones and that sort of thing.
Yeah, typewriters and rotary phones and.
But again, it's got a sort of distinct bit of Japanese flair to it as well, so that distinguishes itself. Yeah, it's very cool though, and sort of all the enemy sprites, they have the sort of the characteristic huge level of detail that Experience's stuff always has. So
yeah, they're amazing.
That'll be interesting to see. So that's launching on Xbox One in Japan on June the 11th of 2020, and then PlayStation 4 and Switch versions will be coming in the winter. They haven't given dates for that yet, but they are coming. So. If you want to play this on a platform that is kind of more associated with dungeon crawlers, then you can do. All right, continuing on. A few other little bits and pieces I spotted today. In fact, one that was quite interesting. Have you been following the drama over the new Cooking Mama game?
Oh yeah, how it's a corporate virus that's going to steal your personal information.
Well, there's been all sorts of weird stuff going on with this. So basically, like early reports came out that this game had some sort of DRM in it. There was actually like mining cryptocurrency for you or that sort of thing, and obviously that was quick to get denied. But then earlier this week, there was a statement from Office Create, who are the owners of the Cooking Mama IP. Where they basically said that Planet Entertainment, who are the people who made Cooking Mama Cookstar, they sort of had it licensed out to them. They basically released this game without being allowed to.
Oh wow, I hadn't heard any of that. I had just been following up on the whole like cryptocurrency like underground like program running while you play it thing. I didn't even realize now there was licensing issues.
Yeah, so the wording from this press release here, there was, in August 2018, Office Create licensed Planet to develop the Cooking Mama Cookstar game for Nintendo Switch. Unfortunately, the quality of the game builds failed to meet the standards that our customers expect and deserve. Office Create rejected a wide range of deficiencies affecting the overall feel, quality and content of the game. Yet despite being contractually obliged to correct the identified deficiencies and resubmit the corrected game for Office Create's approval, Planet proceeded to release Cooking Mama Cookstar without addressing all of the rejections and without Office Create's approval. We've also learned that Planet and/or its European distributor has been promoting an upcoming European release of a PS4 version of Cooking Mama Cookstar. Office Create is not licensed Planet or any other entity to create any Cooking Mama games for PS4. Office Create itself has not been involved in the development of any PS4 Cooking Mama game. So Planet has basically had its license revoked because of this. So there's been lots of sort of back and forth on Twitter with the sort of very respectful but acidic legal language going on. It's like we wish them all the best in their future endeavors and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's been a real mess, this has. So
Cooking Mama of all things.
Yeah.
People still play Cooking Mama. Like I don't like Cooking Mama was like shovelware for the DS. And yet it still persists. Like I don't understand.
There's a lot of people who really love it. I know a lot of people really like the Wii version. and yeah, it's survived with good reason from what I understand. But
it's cute, but like of all things, like a corporate espionage and like license revocation like battle going on over Cooking Mama.
Yeah, absolute bonkers. All right, a couple more things to share before we move on then. Recently, Famitsu and Dengeki did their Game Awards, which was for games released in 2019. So a bunch of relatively predictable stuff in here, but it's interesting sort of the contrast with these awards and Western awards things. So the complete list of winners, which Giuseppe over at Twinfinite posted, because apparently no one else had. So Death Stranding got quite a few awards. Hideo Kojima got the Most Valuable Creator Award, and Death Stranding got 4 awards, including Best Rookie, whatever that means, presumably like Best Debut Title or something like that. Best Action Adventure, Best Graphics, and Best Character. Other noteworthy stuff in there: Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers got Best Online Game, which a lot of people kind of felt that Final Fantasy XIV had been a bit robbed in other award ceremonies last year, especially with how good Shadowbringers supposedly is. I haven't played it yet, but Shadowbringers in particular is supposed to be an excellent expansion. Pokemon Sword and Shield had a pretty strong showing as well. It was voted Best RPG and Game of the Year as well, which is certainly a big contrast from all the whining about it that there's been over here in the West. Persona 5 Royal got Best Music, and the upcoming Vanillaware one, 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim, got Best Adventure, Best Scenario, and I'm sure it got something else as well. No, maybe just 2. But yeah, that seems to have been very well received, certainly. So yeah, some good results for Japanese games, as you might expect there. And then final thing I've got to share, just a quickie. A little while back, Arc System Works released that huge Kunio-kun bundle on Nintendo eShop. No word on the physical releases yet, so I've been holding off buying that. But yeah, they are seemingly starting to release standalone versions of some of the games out there. So at the time of recording, you can get Double Dragon 1, 2, and 3, Renegade, River City Ransom, Crash and the Boys Street Challenge, and Super Dodgeball available separately. They're about $5 each, which would actually work out more expensive than buying the bundle if you ended up buying all of the games. But if you do just want a specific game, you can buy it separately now. And these versions do include the enhanced versions that are in the bundle as well. So you can play the original NES version or the version with improved graphics and sound and that sort of thing.
Cool.
All right. I think that's me done for news. Anything else you want to share before we move on?
No, that's it. Strange times.
Yes, indeed. We've still got half an hour of news out of it, so that's all right. All right, let's take a short break then, and then we'll come back and talk about what we've been playing recently. So we'll see you in a moment. Welcome back. For our second segment, we're going to talk about what we've been playing recently. So, in theory, with our time off, we should have had plenty of time to play things, but I know Chris has already said he's been keeping very busy with work and so on. So, do you want to share what you've been up to lately then, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll probably touch on what we've been playing the most on our next segment. I think we've probably both been mostly hammering away at FF7 Remake. But I also got Persona 5 Royal, which is my first experience with Persona 5. I did not play the original version of Persona 5 because Persona 3 and Persona 4 taught me that if I just waited, there was gonna be another version with more content. So I never played the original version of Persona 5, and like, hoo boy, do I like this game.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, obvious. Like, there was like, I wasn't hyped up for years and years, and like reading and understanding like the immense outpouring of love from the fan community, and thinking this was not a game of the utmost quality. But dear Lord, Persona 5 is designed within an inch of its life.
Yeah.
Like, aesthetically, mechanically, presentation-wise, visually, aurally, like, it may be one of, if not the most comprehensively produced games I've ever got my hands on.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. It is one of the most beautiful looking games I've ever seen, and the poster boy for me, that art style will always trump photorealism.
Oh yeah. I mean, technically, it's a PS3 game.
Yeah.
And it looks amazing because of the stylized presentation. But it's just like, I think a lot of people discount like production as a value.
Yeah.
Like the idea of like production as a comprehensive concept where you build your piece of art, be it a game, a film, an album, whatever, as a comprehensive contained thing with a very specific identity. And like Persona 5's adherence to its own specific identity, which is just the core concept of like cool spy films from like the 60s, like the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, like that era where like being a spy was something people thought about. And like and like the inspiration from like the old Lupin the Third anime. Like the idea of like a goofy, bumbling group of like good-hearted spies and thieves. Like I've always loved that. So like to me, like Persona 5 just directed like straight at my heartstrings because like I have been a Lupin fan for like most of my life. So just everything about it. Like there's elements of like tokusatsu heroism, like plucky teenagers who transform into cool costumes to like right wrongs. And I just think politically and like ethically, like the narrative is so spot on for like the times we're facing right now.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's just literally everything about it is spot on. The music is perfect. The characters are endearing, and mechanically, it's. Nobody told me that Persona 5 was like PS1 era Metal Gear with turn-based combat.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I knew there were, like, but like when I read articles from people who don't know how to discuss mechanics, it was like light stealth elements. Like, no, there's like sticky cover mechanics.
Yeah.
Like, it is a stealth game, and then turn-based combat on top of that, and monster collecting, and charming visual novel style social interactions, like and like I can't believe how like enthralled I am by this game. And an FF7 remake had to come out, and I was like, see you later. but I'll get back to Persona.
Yeah, Persona 5 will keep you busy for a while. I mean, even if it takes you a while to get through it. I mean, it took me a year to get through it because it was one of the games that my wife enjoyed watching me play, so I only played it when she wasn't playing like Final Fantasy XIV or something, so which is fairly infrequently. So yeah, it took us a year to get through it, but we got through it in the end, and I really enjoyed it. I will probably check out Royal at some point because I'm interested to see the new stuff.
Yeah, the new girl is really cool.
Yeah, New Girl's really good. Apparently the new sort of semester of story content is pretty neat as well, so looking forward to seeing that at some point in the future, but it's very much something I will have to make time for. But
like I obviously I didn't play the original, but like from what I understand, there's significant improvements to the Mementos dungeons.
Oh, okay.
To make them like less boring or like more interesting. Like, because I mean, for people who maybe have played a previous Personas but not Persona 5, the Mementos dungeons essentially takes the dungeon crawling of Persona 3 and 4 and just throws an extra game you can play in Persona 5.
Yeah.
So, like, if you don't want to play, like, the story central dungeons of Persona 5 are, like, very modernized with these stealth mechanics because of the thief aspect of the narrative. But the Mementos dungeons, which you can go into for side quests and grinding, are just the same, are just classic randomly generated dungeon crawls.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like that's there too. It's like a game within a game. It's unreal how like comprehensive and robust the package Persona 5 is.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm really pleased you're enjoying this. Because I don't think we've sort of talked about this here on the podcast before, but certainly you went through a while where you weren't a big fan of sort of very talking heavy RPGs, were you? And Persona 5 is extremely narrative heavy. There are often sort of sequences of like 2 hours or more where you don't do anything other than witness dialogue sequences. And so I'm really glad that you're enjoying these things, because although those sequences are lengthy, and I can understand why some people might prefer to get into the action a bit more quickly, but I'm happy to see that you're enjoying those.
I mean, like, I have varying degrees, right, of like how and where and when I find like super talky games acceptable. But like a lot of my reasons for not liking them in the past were largely related to like my living situation. Like, when I was married, my wife was just on the TV all the time. So like we had a very small living space. So like I could never go anywhere to concentrate on talk-heavy games. Like, I was always just, like, in a corner somewhere with my Vita, like, trying to muddle through text while also the TV was blaring, like, 15 feet away from me. Like, now that that's not part of my life and I can actually, like, immerse myself in reading, like, I'm a person who reads books a lot. So, like, theoretically, there's nothing about that text-heavy presentation that's bad for me. It was just, like, I lived in a situation where it was very difficult for me to immerse myself in and enjoy them properly. Now that I can, like, I'm much more open to those experiences. And especially in a game like Persona, where the narrative and the text-heavy components are tied directly to the more traditional gameplay mechanics.
Yes.
Like, I'm still not open to visual novels as a concept because I would rather just read a book.
Yes.
But but a game like Persona that's very talky, but those relationships then reflect the gameplay mechanics and then it ties it to the gaminess in a way that makes sense, I'm much more open to. Same with the Trails series. Like, I used to be not super big on the Trails series because there's a lot of dialogue. But, like, now I'm more equipped to enjoy those as an immersive experience. So I'm looking forward to revisiting them.
Yeah, definitely. They are games that sort of demand your attention, and I mean, it's just like other kinds of media, isn't it? Where there's some things you can just sort of put on in the background and chill out with, and then there's other things that you really need to engage with fully in order to appreciate them. And this sort of experience very much falls into that latter category.
Essentially, Anne deserves my full attention, and if I couldn't have given it to her, I wasn't even going to try to play it.
Annie, I thought you'd be more of a Makoto person, but
I haven't met Makoto yet. So
right, okay.
So listen, like, right now, all I have is Anne.
Oh, fair enough.
And Anne is perfect enough. So like, I don't know. Like, I have a feeling I'm gonna be a Haru person.
Oh yeah, maybe.
Cause like I aesthetically, I'm definitely a Makoto person, but like, I'm not really, like, super into the whole, like, I'm class president, like, I'm best at everything girl. So, like, I don't know how it's gonna feel. Like, from what I know about, like, Haru, just from, like, reading wikis and stuff, I think she's probably, from a personality standpoint, more who I'm gonna, like, gravitate towards, but... Yeah. But we shall see. Cool. There's plenty, lots of discovery. All that matters now is that I want Morgana to be my best friend.
Yes.
I love Morgana so much. Like, I'm gonna buy the Nendoroid because it comes with the swivel chair and the cigar.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, it's the best. I just want to live my life like Persona 5 and have a talking cat spy friend who lives in my bag and just, like, is my buddy and, like, like, helps me, like, now's a good time to read. Like, you know what, talking cat friend, I should totally use this opportunity to read and better myself. Like, I need that. Don't we all need that? Like, talking cat thief friend?
Definitely.
I don't know. Morgana's the best.
Yep.
I'm, like, super smitten with this game.
I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah. Cool. Anything else you've been up to then, besides that?
Not really, man. FF7 Remake and Persona, like...
Well, yeah.
What else is there time for? It's...
yeah, absolutely.
The only other thing I'm doing besides playing FF7 Remake and Persona is, like, consistently checking the Evercade websites and social medias to, like, make sure we hopefully get our Evercades in May. Like, if that counts as an activity, I'm dedicating a lot of time to
Yeah, so, like I said to you offline before we started recording, they have pretty much confirmed May the 22nd of 2020 as the release date for it, so... barring anything absolutely disastrous happening, we should get them by then. And a lot of review units have gone out recently as well, so it looks like they should be on track for that. So
there's definitely a couple episodes in that thing for us.
Oh god, yeah, definitely. I've set myself the target of writing about all the games that are on those collections, because I went for the all-in bundle plus the Technos collection that they announced after the system was announced. So I'm going to try and cover everything over time as well, because that will keep me in things to write about for ages while I'm continuing to play the Atelier games as well. So
technically, like, what's the count? Technically, if you consider every game on each cartridge collection, I think this is a console that's launching with over 120 games.
Yeah.
It's all like I was saying, I had a friend who was skeptical about it, and they were like, well, what if it fails? It's like, you don't understand. It doesn't matter if it fails.
Yeah.
The launch lineup is significant.
Yeah.
Like, if they never printed another cartridge again.
Yeah, exactly. If they don't release anything beyond this launch lineup, you've got 120 games to play.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It could fail. I mean, I hope it doesn't fail, because I want to get my hands on that Atari Lynx collection. Yeah. But it doesn't matter if they never print another cartridge besides the initial launch lineup of 10 carts. Like, you're set. Who could ever need any more?
And they've already confirmed that they're going to release 4 additional cartridges this year. So 2 of them have been announced already. There's the Atari Lynx bundle and the double pack of Xenocrisis and Tanglewood. They've signed a 3rd, but they haven't announced it yet. And they apparently have lots of options for the 4th. So they're aiming to do 4 more besides what is currently available for pre-order in the rest of this year. So,
and I hope the Atari Lynx is full. The Atari Lynx is definitely dubbed Volume 1, right? Like, there's going to be more Lynx carts. Yeah. Oh, boy. Oh, sorry for the distraction. I just think about this thing. No. I think about this thing constantly.
It's absolutely fine. I am super excited for this as well. So, you can expect a lot of coverage of this on MoeGamer when it finally is in my hands.
I'm already pricing, 12-foot HDMI cables so I can run it to my TV.
Yeah, I will have to do the same as well, because I want to capture footage and screenshots and stuff from it. So, yes. All right, so what have I been up to? I've been playing Final Fantasy VII Remake as well, but like we said, we'll probably talk about that in our 3rd segment. So I can say a few things about some of the other things I've been playing lately. So over on MoeGamer.net, the Atelier Mega feature is continuing at present. I'm up to Atelier Iris 3 Grand Phantasm now, which is a really interesting game, actually. It's... It feels quite different from the first 2 Atelier Iris games in quite a few ways. Probably most notable for me is the soundtrack, because the soundtrack for Atelier Iris 3 sounds a lot more like the more recent Atelier games. There's just something about the instrumentation that's used in it. Sounds very much like the soundtracks of Atelier Rorina in particular. There's this distinctive sort of combination of there's harmonica and sort of guitar, and I guess it sounds sort of like 1970s synth, I guess.
Well, you had me at harmonica. So.
Yeah. So there's definitely a very distinctive audible feel to the soundtrack that is very distinctive, and that I associate very much with the Atelier series, specifically in Atelier Iris 3, that I really like. The structure is very different to the previous 2, although the previous 2 games had quite different structures to each other already. This one is very hub-based, so in some ways it's quite similar to both the older and the newer Atelier games, in that you have a central location that you radiate out from rather than going on a journey. That's what I liked about it. It's very quest-based. It's almost... I'd almost say it's almost kind of MMO-ish in structure. But specifically older MMOs like Final Fantasy XI and stuff, in that it's all about doing a bunch of stuff to build up points, and then when you've got enough points, that triggers like a major story mission, which is basically the exact structure that Final Fantasy XI has. And so, yeah, I like that structure because none of these quests really feel like throwaway quests either. Each of the smaller quests that lead up to the major story missions, they have sort of significant narrative and mechanical content in them as well. So, like, some will introduce the tools that you can use to clear certain obstacles out of the way. Some will introduce characters. Some will provide Iris with new recipes to make in the alchemy workshop and that sort of thing. So, everything you do in this game feels meaningful, which is always a good thing in an RPG. Mm-hmm. I really like the combat system in this. There's it's kind of I don't know, it's kind of hard to describe. I want to say it's fighting game inspired, but not in terms of sort of direct mechanical execution, but in terms of sort of presentation and stuff. So the core of Atelier Iris 3's combat is that you have this bar in the corner of the screen called the burst bar. And basically every attack that you do in Atelier Iris 3 tends to have more than one hit. And every hit adds to this burst bar in the corner. And like if you hit an elemental weakness, it will add more to the burst bar than it would do if you're hitting something that they're resistant against. And when you fill the burst bar, you get this sort of wonderfully satisfying explosive sound, and like the word burst appears in massive letters on the screen, very similarly to how Fever shows up in Lapis Labyrinth. And like the background goes all swirly, and while that is going on, every attack you land adds to like a combo counter. And if the higher you build that combo counter, the more experience points and sort of job progression points you get at the end of combat as well. So it's very much about even in sort of like the more random combats along the way, it's very much about sort of trying to finish combats as stylishly as possible. And I really like that side of things, especially in a turn-based game, because it's so easy for turn-based games to sort of degenerate into just mashing the attack button over and over again and sort of grinding your way through it. But this system makes it feel like most combats are, again, meaningful. They give you something to do, something to aim for, and you get a direct benefit from it. You progress more quickly if you engage fully with that system. So yeah, I really like that side of things. So
I really enjoy too how like aesthetically and thematically like Atelier Iris 3 has this weird like era of like tongue-in-cheek like faux badassness, which is not part of like normal Atelier games.
Yeah,
like you were to say like burst and like flaming, and like your like main character is like a sassy mercenary with a mechanical sword that like transforms into like a chainsaw. Like
the main character is literally called Edge.
yeah. It's all very like, oh, this is the badass Atelier game, but like they still don't know how to do it. Like it's still like cozy and sweet, but like also bursts and like chainsaw sword.
It's totally deliberate. It's got to be totally deliberate because you've got.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt.
Because you've got this ridiculous sort of attempts at badass side of things, and then you've got Nell, who is just the most adorable character ever, with the most massive tits I've ever seen in a Gust game.
Yeah, that's abnormal for a Gust. There's that new girl in Ryza, that like Dark Knight girl.
Yeah.
She's a little out of control.
Yeah. But there's one thing I really like about the Iris series as a whole is there's quite a strong 90s anime feel to it. I guess sort of early 2000s anime would probably be more accurate, but I sort of associate a lot of the facial expressions and stuff and the style of some of the characters very much with sort of 90s anime, sort of the very exaggerated expressions and that sort of thing. And it's just a really sort of pleasing aesthetic to the character design and stuff. So, but yeah, it's a lovely looking game actually. It's the 2D backdrops are really lovely. They sort of really mastered the combination of sort of isometric block based construction with lovely 2D art overlaid on the top of it. It actually reminds me quite a bit of some of the Mana games in some ways, which is I guess sort of appropriate given the Atelier Iris sort of being based around mana spirits and that sort of thing, but just kind of the color palette and the detail in the forest scenes in particular as well. Yeah, it feels very, very mana-ish to me.
Yeah, this is peak 2D Gust.
Yeah.
Like Atelier Iris 3, Monokemia, and Art and Jaleco 2 are just like peak 2D Gust.
Yeah, beautiful games. All right. Besides that, I have also been playing Disaster Report 4. So, Disaster Report 4 is not the most beautiful game you will ever see, by any means. It is running on Unreal Engine 4 badly. And from a technical perspective, it's an absolute mess. But from narrative and mechanical perspective, it's one of the most fascinating games I've played for a long time. So if you're not familiar, Disaster Report is a series that was originally created by Irem back in the PS2 era. And I guess you'd call them survival horror in some ways, except it's not sort of survival horror against monsters and zombies and that sort of thing. It's survival horror against sort of things collapsing and exploding and natural disasters and that sort of thing. Disaster Report 4 is kind of almost really toned down that side of things. So the actual earthquake that is the catalyst for the whole experience is sort of... It happens every so often, and you get aftershocks, and you have to deal with them and make sure you don't fall into the water and drown, or have buildings fall on you and that sort of thing. But for the most part, it's a game about exploring the different ways that people respond to these disasters, and it's a really fascinating exploration of how a situation like a major earthquake in a big city brings out both the best and worst in humanity. And that includes the player character as well. So you can play through this game as an absolute piece of shit if you want to, or you can help people out as you go through. And they tend not to be binary choices either, which is nice. So generally, when something happens, you'll have a choice of like 5 or 6 or 7 different dialogue options to choose from on how you respond to things. Some of them will do the same thing, but the interesting thing about them from kind of a storytelling, artistic, narrative perspective is that it makes you think about the context of what is going on and how your character is responding to them. And I think that's a big part of the point of this game is to make you think about the situation. And like I say, it doesn't necessarily have a direct mechanical impact on what's going on, or even change the direction of the story in some cases. But the fact that you chose a specific option on how to react to that situation, and sort of decided that your inner monologue at that point was going to think this specific thing, yeah, it's fascinating. And yeah, there's lots of interesting stories to follow through. It's quite replayable as well, because there's things you can miss and sort of different routes you can go down and different choices you can make and that kind of thing. The version we've got over here is actually a port of a slightly later version that includes what was some DLC for the original version that came out in 2018, I think. So there's a so there's a lengthy epilogue scenario in there that basically kind of ties up all the loose ends that were left by the story. And also has the kind of helpful function of pointing out things you might have missed as well, because the epilogue basically assumes that you did all of the side stories in the main game. So if you play through that and you come across some characters that you didn't encounter in the main story, you can think, oh, okay, right, I can replay that and I can specifically look out for this character second time around, which is quite interesting.
That's cool.
But yeah, it's a really cool game. So as long as you can look past the atrocious frame rates and the fuzzy Unreal Engine 4 graphics and that sort of thing, it is very much a worthwhile experience that I would recommend you enjoy at some point.
Yeah, I remember too. It's like when I talked about Destiny Connect. Mm-hmm. It's like sometimes these Japanese companies, especially on the Switch with Unreal Engine, really just. Maybe pick a different engine. Maybe.
Well, apparently, this game runs like shit on PS4 as well. So it's not just the Switch version in this case. Although the Switch version is probably worse. There are points in this game where you can literally count the frames by eye. Although they did put out a patch shortly after launch that does improve it very slightly. It's still janky as hell, but. You know, it's part.
But does the PS4 version have like the Vaseline smear?
I don't know. I don't know. I haven't tried it. There are demos of both the Switch and the PS4 version, so you could give them a go for yourself and see if one is preferable to the other, and that should hopefully give you an idea of how they perform on both platforms. So, but like I say, this is one of those games where I know people care about frame rate and resolution and that sort of thing these days, and But in this game, the frame rate doesn't really affect the gameplay as such. It's all about sort of immersing yourself in this world, and it's a wonderfully immersive world to explore with lots and lots of detail. And that's the main thing. That's the thing that kept me playing sort of for hours at a time. It was just such a compelling, interesting game that I played it for hours at a time and just loved it. So yeah, give it a chance, I'd say. All right.
Happily.
I think that's probably everything I want to talk about besides Final Fantasy VII Remake. So we'll save that for the next segment. So anything else you want to bring up before we finish?
No, sir.
Alrighty, let's take a short break then, and then we'll come back and we will talk about remakes. So see you in a moment.
いやー、いいですよ。困った時はお互い様って言いますからね。
おい、どうした？ああ、君か。また会ったな。
先生、このおばあさんなんです。
痛みますか？
Welcome back. For our third segment, we thought we'd talk a bit about remakes, because at the time of recording, Final Fantasy VII Remake has just released and raised a lot of interesting questions and discussions and things, and of course some people ranting and raving as they do on the internet as well. But we thought we would talk a bit more generally about remakes over the years and various examples that we've come across. Final Fantasy VII will almost certainly enter the conversation at some point as well. But we want to talk about the concept sort of generally as well, about why you might do it, what different approaches there are, different challenges that people have faced along the way. So yeah, we've both got some things that we want to talk about on this topic. So I thought if we just start with the question of why you would want to remake things in the first place. I've put 4 points for this that you may or may not be able to add to. So the 4 things I put down for reasons that people might want to remake things are to firstly to better realise creative visions that were originally constrained in some way, whether that was through budget or technology or the experience level of the developers. Second one, to bring things to a new audience. So something that came out 20 years ago. If you remake it, you can bring it to a current audience as well, who maybe wasn't around for it first time. You've got kind of the opposite of that as well, which is to cash in on nostalgia. So for those people who were around 20 years ago for the original, you can do a remake to kind of really stir those feelings of nostalgia in people. And then finally, the final point I put was to explore something further or in more detail than the original version provided. So if you got any more thoughts on why remakes are a thing in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, nothing that's kind of too different from what you said, but like also I just feel like another aspect would just be artistic vision and like creative aspects. So like like what we're seeing with not just in terms of like improvement or to extrapolate or to focus more, but like to change. You know, I think a part of what can make a remake great is changing. It's obviously one of the things that people also get the angriest about on the internet. But like when I was conceiving of the notion of a remake, I do what I normally did, which was kind of like go back into myself and to my experiences studying popular culture as an overarching like societal thing. And like when you really think about the concept of a remake as we consider it in the gaming sphere, the idea of a remake within popular culture is not unique to games at all, right? If you think about the music industry, think about covers.
Yeah.
So like why does a band make a cover? Because A, they love the original song and they want to celebrate it. And B, they want to take their personality, their skills, and their artistic vision and apply it and see how they can reinterpret and represent something they love with their skill set and their vision. Mm-hmm. So I think that type of artistic approach where you're not just remaking or improving or expanding, but also occasionally changing. A remake doesn't necessarily even have to be a celebration. You could make a remake that's a critical teardown of something, a commentary or a parody. there's a lot of space there to explore what a remake can be in like new creative ways, and that's something that's persisted in television, film, video games, music, everything. Think about everyone loves JoJo's Bizarre Adventure right now, but like the Stardust Crusaders arc has been remade twice, anime wise, with kind of new levels of vision, new approaches.
And there are people who still hate that arc.
Yeah. So, but like, it's a concept that persists in arts and entertainment, and so like creative vision and new artistic interpretations is also a really important aspect of that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I've sort of looked through my past experience with some games and thought about some different ways that people have approached it over the years, and this is looking right back to sort of even into the 80s, like the 8-bit home computing era.
Absolutely.
And I came up with probably 6 different approaches that people might take to remakes. Again, there may be more of these, but these are the ones that sort of came off the top of my head when I was thinking about what we were going to talk about here. So the first one I've got is a complete rewrite of the game's code, but the exact same game structure and mechanics. An example I've got in mind for this is a very old game called Temple of Apshai, which I've covered on my Atari A to Z series on YouTube. So Temple of Apshai was one of the first home computer role-playing games. It was put out by a company called Epix. And the original version of it was written in BASIC, so it ran very, very slowly. And it also didn't have features that we take for granted in sort of role-playing and adventure games today. Like, it had no save game system, for one. But it did have the ability to sort of continue a past game by literally writing down all of your stats, including your experience points and your equipment and stuff. And then when you started playing the game again, you would type all that stuff back in and you'd be able to pick up where you left off. That was in the original version. So I think it was about 5 or 6 years later, after the original Temple of Apshai had 2 expansion packs, they released a package called the Temple of Apshai Trilogy, which incorporated both the original Temple of Apshai game and its 2 expansions into one version on floppy disk. And what they did here is they took the opportunity not to just do a re-release, but they completely rewrote the whole game. So they, instead of writing it in BASIC, they wrote it in machine code, so it ran a lot faster. And they took the opportunity to actually put in some file handling in there as well, so you could now save your game, you could save your characters and that sort of thing. But at its core, the mechanics of the game were exactly the same. The structure of the game was exactly the same. It was still this fascinating take on kind of computer-assisted role-playing, I guess you'd call it. So Temple of Apshai, if you've not come across it before, you play the game on the screen, but there's also like numerical prompts that you'll get, things like room numbers and treasure numbers and so on. And when they come up, you have to read from a book. So you enter room number 1 and you read the passage from the book about room number 1. And they kept that in Temple of Apshai Trilogy, despite the fact that their improved experience with developing for home computers and the additional storage space they can use on floppy disk and that sort of thing would have allowed them to put a lot of that text in the game. They still kept it this same experience. It was just
delicious.
Yeah, it was just a better version of that same experience. So there's now no real reason to play the original release of Temple of Apshai, because you can have a better version of that base experience without any sort of tweaks to it, aside from making it perform better, in the form of Temple of Apshai Trilogy. So that's sort of one example. So you keep the same game, but you rewrite it so that it's better. Second one I've got is porting a game to a more powerful platform. And again, I'm looking back to the 80s for this one. So back in the 80s, there was a game released called Alternate Reality: The City. I don't know if you've heard of this before, but sort of legend has it that this game was the direct inspiration for The Matrix. I don't know if that's true or not, but supposedly that's what sort of urban myth has it. So in Alternate Reality, what happens is that you are abducted from Earth and taken to an alien planet. And this alien planet is set up in such a way that it seems to resemble a medieval city on Earth. So you're exploring this city. You're just trying to survive. This was one of the first ever open world freeform games that I ever saw. There was no concrete objective in it. You just had to wander around the city and acquire yourself some weapons and armor. You could get a job. You could join various guilds and improve your skills and so on. But there was no sort of concrete objective. You just sort of played and saw how far you could get without dying. And the grand plan for the series was to release a bunch of additional expansions for that would ultimately lead you to escaping the alien planet. And it was these last the last two parts that never got released. Were what supposedly inspired the Matrix. It was supposed to be that the whole thing was like a big simulation, and you would break out the simulation and you would see sort of everyone in all these pods and everything like that, and you would then explore like the real world that you'd been captured into and that sort of thing. That never happened for various reasons. I mean, it was mostly the fact it was a bit too ambitious. But one of the interesting things about this is that Alternate Reality, the city, and its follow-up, The Dungeon, they both got ported to 16-bit home computers, the Atari ST and the Amiga. And that had a very positive effect on these games, because on the original Atari 8-bit version, it came on 2 floppy disks with stuff on both sides of them. And so as you were playing this game, you were constantly swapping disks, turning disks over, please insert disc 2 side B and all that sort of thing. Whereas the whole thing fit on 1 floppy disk for the Atari ST and Amiga. So you could just bung the disc in and just play it. And again, they kept the exact same game structure and mechanics, improved the graphics, improved the sound and all that sort of thing. It was the same game, but porting it to a more powerful platform made it feel like a very different experience. So that's sort of the second approach that I put down. The third one we've got is HD remasters, which is probably the simplest approach you can take to a remake, which is taking an original game and then basically just re-releasing it for a new platform. It's not necessarily making it run better or anything like that. It is just remastering it for a new audience.
Yeah, I don't even know if I count that amongst what we're talking about here.
Yeah,
like, to me, I classify a remake and a remaster as like two like separate and distinct entities, right? Like I'm when I think of remake, I think something that was made from the ground up. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I almost didn't put this in here, but I thought it was worth acknowledging at least.
Yeah,
so I'm not going to say too. But I'm not going to say too much more about that. Next thing I put down was plus versions with additional content over the original. So, sort of, I guess the poster child for this would be the first few Atelier games on PS1, which all had at least 2 or 3 releases for various platforms. So, like the first Atelier game was released on PlayStation 1. And then it was released on Saturn with an additional feature where it would use the built-in clock for various things. And then that version was ported back to PlayStation, and it was then later ported to Dreamcast as well. So each of those versions was slightly different, with different ways of incorporating its content and so on. But again, it was the same game. It was remade for each platform, with, in some cases, ways of taking advantage of the unique features of that platform, but it was the same game. And connected to that, we have plus versions where they revamp or improve the mechanics and visuals. So again, we can look at Atelier for this. If we look at the original Atelier Rorona and then Atelier Rorona Plus, which basically takes the mechanics and presentation of Atelier Merubu and ports it back to Atelier Rorona. So again, you've got in this case, you've got the same basic concept of the game, but you do have actually revamped mechanics and visual presentation and that sort of thing. That's a good approach. I like that approach, because Atelier Rorona was sort of noticeably clunkier than the other two in that series. And so then going back to that one and improving the way it played and bringing it more in line with the other ones, that was a really positive approach, I think. And then finally, of course, we have a remake that is a complete reimagining of a project, and obviously the poster child for that at the moment is Final Fantasy VII Remake. So, What have you got to add to that, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think your kind of walkthrough of those different approaches kind of highlighted a lot of what I had to say about, like, nowadays people talk about, like, remakes and remasters, and there's a lot of complaining occasionally that it's like, can't they make new games? Or, like, it's a sign that there's, like, creativity's gone, and, like, and you hear it a lot, too, in the film industry, because, like, films get remade or changed or tweaked, but, I think to a lot of those criticisms, I say that this has always been a part of the industry. Like, a lot of the stuff you were talking about harken back to the 80s. And I think about, like, the arcade scene, and I think about classic stuff like Galaga, Space Invaders, Pac-Man. A lot of those classic games in the history of their existence have been revamped, tweaked, and re-released on different platforms with different iterations. I'm not talking about sequels, right? I'm talking just about Pac-Man or Galaga. And, like, how many times has there been, like, Galaga 98 that's, like, mechanically pretty much identical, but just reprogrammed on more modern platforms with revamped visuals or slightly tweaked scoring mechanics. Like, so this is not something that's new to the industry at all. It's not just driven by this notion that we can take older games and make them HD or whatever. Like, this drive to reiterate and improve on stuff that's already great is kind of intrinsically tied to gaming's history as a unique medium that combines art with science and tech. So, thinking back to, like, early examples that, like, I've always loved is, like, Super Castlevania 4 is just a remake of the original Castlevania. Like, narratively, Super Castlevania 4 is Castlevania 1. Like, Simon's first adventure, beefed up with visuals and all the bells and whistles that the Super Nintendo had to offer. All the sprite scrolling, the ability to make sprites out of multiple pieces, the zooming, the sound effects. Like, so we can see this as, like, an intrinsic drive in the industry back to, like, way early days. I also always think fondly of, like, Ghosts and Goblins and, like, the Ghosts and Goblins and Super Ghouls and Ghosts. Like, those are all remakes of the same narrative experience. Like, none of those are no, like, remake of Ghouls and Ghosts or Ghosts and Goblins has ever been like Ghosts and Goblins 2. They're always just Ghosts and Goblins on a different platform, on a more powerful platform, with changed visuals or new weapons added. So, like, this idea to reiterate or rebuild from the ground up and improve upon it is something that's always been there for us. And it's something that's always been a lot of joy for me, like to play the new version of Ghosts and Goblins or the new version of Castlevania. Like, how does it celebrate the thing I used to love in a new way? Doesn't subsume it or replace it. It just becomes a new way to experience it. I also thought, too, like, historically, there are certain companies or certain platforms that have been really, like, houses worth highlighting for this. Something I think you've got a lot of experience with, and I know I've always cared about, is the Ys series.
Oh, yep.
Just thinking about the original Ys 1 and 2. Like, how many times has Falcom remade and repackaged Ys 1 and 2?
I think it was at least 4. I counted when I wrote about them. It was at least 4 different versions of that.
Yeah, it's crazy because there's at least the original. So there's the original computer versions. Then there's the PC Engine versions. There's the versions that were made on the PS2. There's the versions that were made on the DS. There's the versions that were made on the PSP, and I'm sure I'm missing more. It says like 6 by my count versions of Ys 1 and 2.
Yeah, well, the versions on the PSP were expanded versions of a version that came out on PC as well. So yeah, there's another one in there.
And like, but so those, and each one of those was a ground up remake, not a port. So like Ys, like the DS versions of Ys 1 and 2 are like not really liked a lot because they made some mechanical tweaks that a lot of people didn't really appreciate. So it's almost a totally new game.
Yeah.
And Falcom's always been really interested in doing this. So like I think back to Oath and Felghana. Oath and Felghana is a remake of Ys 3 using 6's engine.
Yeah.
And of course, the poster child for this, like the most ambitious of this, is Memories of Calcutta.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So historically, for people who aren't like huge Falcom fans, Ys 4 is legendarily a very bizarre entry in the series history because there were two different versions of Ys 4 on different platforms that were developed by different development houses. So they're totally different games, but they're both called Ys 4.
Yeah, and neither of them were developed by Falcom originally.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So what Memories of Calcutta did was it was an effort by Falcom to take elements they liked essentially of both of them, and Falcom themselves make a definitive canonical version of Ys 4 that would become the version of Ys 4 using 7's fully 3D engine.
Yeah.
And to take that and make essentially a remake that took two disparate games, took all the best elements of them with new elements, and made this ambitious action RPG. I can't wait for the PS4 version.
That's a great game, that one.
Yeah, it's great. So yeah, like Falcom have always been pretty big on doing this, and I think that's really neat. I also thought very fondly back to the PSP. For some reason, the PSP was like a gold mine for this.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like Capcom, right? They did a whole series of like 3D remakes of classic Capcom side-scrollers.
Yeah.
So there was the Mega Man. They did Mega Man X as Mega Man Maverick Hunter X was a 3D remake of the original Mega Man X. They did Mega Man Powered Up, which was a really stylized representation of the original Mega Man, the very first one. And there was Ultimate Ghosts and Goblins, which was a really nice polygonal Ghosts and Goblins game. And then getting out of Capcom's house, there was, of course, the Dracula X Chronicles, which for many people who weren't PC Engine savvy or weren't into the PC Engine CD collecting scene, it was a lot of people in the West's first opportunity to play the original Rondo of Blood. Because Dracula X Chronicles was a fully 3D ground-up remake of Rondo of Blood. You could also unlock the original in it later, but it was a fully 3D remake of that original game. And also on the PSP was Tactics Ogre, Let Us Cling Together, which was a super ambitious rebuilding of the original Super Nintendo Tactics Ogre, with new features. It had like a system that would allow you to go back in time and like revisit various plot points and see how the different choices can play out, which is cool because of the way the story branches in that game. And it was such a beloved project that Matsuno actually returned to Square briefly to help work on the project. Yeah. Because like that was his baby. So like one of the things that's great about remixes and remasters is it gives creators the opportunity to, as you mentioned before, perhaps they were constrained due to budgets or tech availability or what have you, to return to works that are super meaningful to them and perhaps present us with a better or more comprehensive vision of what they always wanted to make in the first place. Yeah. Which from an artistic perspective is a dream.
Yeah, definitely. One quite interesting example I find from that regard is Sorcery Saga on PSP, and I think there's a PC version now as well. Yes, in fact there is, because I played that one on my YouTube channel, didn't I? But Sorcery Saga, which is from Idea Factory and Compile Heart, is actually a remake of Mado Monogatari, which is the old Compile dungeon crawler series that is the reason Puyo Puyo exists. Yeah. But obviously Puyo Puyo belongs to Sega now, so Compile Heart were not able to use sort of any of the original characters or the Puyo Puyo stuff and that sort of thing. But in terms of sort of structure and narrative, it is very much a modern reimagining of Mado Monogatari. But the interesting thing about that is they basically changed it into a different type of game as well. So whereas Mado Monogatari was a first-person dungeon crawler, Sorcery Saga is actually, it's a mystery dungeon game. And so if someone hadn't told you that it was a remake of this much older game, you probably wouldn't know. But for the actual creators of that game, it's probably super meaningful.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when you first told me about that, and I was like blown away by it. Like I had no idea, because it's not like it was something that was like widely publicized.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. Like the notion that we can even take games and transfer them into a different genre when we remake them. Mm-hmm. One of the examples I had from my collection was I really like the Lufia series.
Yeah.
And Lufia Curse of the Sinistrals on the DS is a remake of Lufia 2 on the Super Nintendo. Lufia 2 on the Super Nintendo is a pretty traditional turn-based role-playing game. I mean, it's very good, but it's just super traditional. Right? There's not a whole heck of a lot about it that's super noteworthy in terms of like mechanics or innovation. It had some light Zelda-style puzzle solving and a solid RPG battle system. But Curse of the Sinistrals on the DS was an East-style action RPG.
Oh, cool.
It wasn't even... it wasn't even the same genre. It was totally different. But it was still the same story. It was the same narrative. It was the same world, same characters. Mm-hmm. But obviously brought out by the better technology. But just something in them said, we're going to remake Lufia 2 as an action RPG.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is probably a good point to bring up 7 Remake, isn't it? Because that's basically what they've done with the mechanical side of things there. Although they haven't they haven't completely changed it into like a hack and slash action RPG like some people feared that they would.
Yeah.
What they've done is that they've provided some more, I don't know if you'd call them more up to date, but certainly some different mechanics that combine the things that they learned from subsequent Final Fantasy games.
I was gonna say it's really like a pinnacle of like evolution of like the way Final Fantasy's been moving for the past decade.
Final Fantasy VII Remake's combat is basically a blend of everything from 11 to 15. There are bits of all of those games in 7 Remake. And like you say, it is sort of the pinnacle of Final Fantasy being a series of constant reinvention. The very concept of if it's not new, it's not Final Fantasy.
Yeah, 100%. And it's fascinating, like as a mechanics guy, to sit down and drill into like the elements of 7 and what came from where and like how did we get here. Like, what did they take from 15? What didn't work in 15 that they ditched? What did work in 15 that they kept? What did they take from 12? What did they take from the online ones? It's amazing to try to track that. Mm. And I love it. I mean, the combat's so satisfying.
Oh, it's excellent. It's excellent. It's like way better than I expected it to be. But it's super satisfying. Just because, like we've said, it is bringing the best elements of all the things that they've done before, bringing what they've learned from previous games and sort of picking the best bits and then sticking them all together.
And like what they've done to, at least something to me that I really appreciate in it is, as someone who likes to think really hard about like mechanics and character design, is like one of the things that's really cool about FF7 is like the original FF7 is FF7 didn't have a job system, right? Didn't have a job system, just like 6 before it didn't have a job system. But one of the things I always loved about job systems was taking the characters' designs as well as the stats and the way they perform and trying to figure out what classic FF job class each character was actually supposed to be.
Yes.
Right. So like we know it now more than anything because 7 has really taken those classic FF job class archetypes and translated them now into an active time action sphere. So like now you get the joy of like really understanding from a cadence of rhythm, movement, and performance. How would it feel to play as a warrior? How would it feel to play as a monk? How would it feel to play as a mage? Because like when you go from the party of 3 of having Cloud, Barret, and Tifa, which is essentially warrior, monk, black mage, Then you get into the part of the story where you lose Tifa and Barrett momentarily, and you just have Cloud and Aerith. Like, you have to totally relearn everything you learned by playing as Tifa and Barrett to control Aerith properly, because she is I guess Barrett's more of a red mage, because he can do all magic fairly well and has a strong hit. But Aerith is just a pure mage, right? She's useless. She cannot take a hit. So you have to learn magic inside and out all of a sudden to survive. And there's something so mechanically delicious about the way it's taken all the classic trappings of Final Fantasy, the job class system, and the notion of different classes performing differently and having different strengths, and mapped that to an active system.
Yeah.
Where you have to feel those differences and understand them in order to survive.
I find it really interesting in that regard that they even took mechanics from the online games in that as well. Like Tifa's version of Monk is straight out of 14, for example.
Yeah. So like I played Monk in 14, so I actually got it.
Yeah. So like the way she builds up sort of charges of a buff to improve how powerful she is, but can then spend those charges on various things. Yeah, that is straight out of 14's interpretation of Monk. And it's great. It works really well. They've really sort of nailed the way that they can put those different job classes in there. And what's interesting about 7 Remake is that you can kind of customize and tweak to a certain degree as well. And that kind of... It's not necessarily a complete change of role in the party. So, like, Cloud is never going to be a tank, for example. But you can change Cloud from being sort of a black mage type into more of a thief type, depending on what weapon you've got equipped and what material you've got equipped and what stat bonuses he's getting from those as well.
Yeah, the weapons became job classes, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you're not playing 7 Remake, each weapon has its own complement of skill points, and you spend these skill points on various passive bonuses and stat increases and so on. And certain weapons are clearly geared towards casting magic. Certain weapons are clearly geared towards tanking or physical damage or that sort of thing. And so weapons aren't necessarily better than each other. But
they remain valid for the whole game. That's one of the things that's most beautiful. They've created a system where every weapon is valid at all times. So unlike the original FF7, one of the things that was most depressing about FF7 was Buster Sword's cool as shit. You use it for the first hour and a half and you never use the Buster Sword again.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Exactly. But what they've done is they've made the Buster Sword always valid. Every weapon serves a different function and a point and purpose.
Yeah.
It's great. It's so great, and it makes hunting and collecting the weapons even more important, because they never become invalid, they never become useless, they all serve a purpose. Even a freaking nail bat, it has a different rhythm, it has a different set of stats. You could play nail bat Cloud the whole game if you wanted to.
Yeah. My wife came in while I was playing when I just got the nail bat, and she was like, "Where's his cool sword gone?" So I've got this now.
This is cool. This is cooler. Shh. A street urchin gave it to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like remakes in the sense of FF7 Remake can actually be an opportunity to celebrate not just the game it's remaking, but like the legacy and the history of like the development lessons that the people making it have learned throughout the years, to reapply those lessons in that new experience to enhance something that was already good in the first place.
Yeah.
And Square are another one of the houses where, like, in my notes I had written that are no strangers to that, certainly. How many times, just like we were talking about Ys, how many times has FF1 and 2 been remade?
Yeah, exactly. Again, FF1 and 2, I mean, they were remade several times within the same generation, in fact. So, like, if you look back to Final Fantasy 1, that had its original Famicom release, and then it was released on MSX as a slightly improved version. And then there was the NES version, which had its own little tweaks and things there. And then that went to WonderSwan Color with its improved graphics, and the WonderSwan Color version became the PlayStation version, and the PlayStation version became the Game Boy Advance version, and then the Game Boy Advance version became the PSP version. And each of those versions is worth playing for one reason or another.
Yeah.
But they all have their differences. They all have their own unique twists on things. Which gives each of them their own unique appeal as well. So, for example, my favourite version of Final Fantasy is the PSP version because it's just the version I like the most, but it's also the most accessible to people who have come to RPGs a bit more recently as well, because the various mechanics that it uses in there are not quite as... I don't know if antiquated is the right word, but Final Fantasy I was very much based on tabletop Dungeons and Dragons, and there were certain systems in there that people find it a bit difficult to deal with from a modern perspective, particularly the magic system. So the magic system in Final Fantasy I uses what tends to get referred to as a Vancian magic system, which is what D&D used, which is where mages have up to 9 spell levels, and as they level up, they get more casts of a particular level. So a high level mage will be able to cast lots of level 1 spells and a few like level 8 and level 9 spells, and you get more casts per level as you level up. So that means there was a hard cap on how many times you could cast your most powerful spells before having to rest, which meant you had to be very conservative with how much you could use magic in the original releases of Final Fantasy. But I think the Game Boy Advance version onwards, so the Game Boy Advance and the PSP version and the smartphone versions, they use a more traditional magic point system. So they still have the spell level, so you still have to be a certain level in order to cast certain spells, but you just have a straight pool of magic points to pull from instead. And that is a lot more understandable and accessible to people who grew up with more recent RPGs. And it also I found in my playthrough on YouTube as well that it makes mages a bit more interesting to play as well.
Yeah, or useful. Like
yeah.
like when you watch like old school playthroughs of the old Final Fantasies, there's a reason like 4 warrior just like power runs are like the best way to play FF1, because like it's difficult to manage the mages with the limited casts.
Yeah.
They're only useful at the bosses, but then like having them survive to the bosses is a chore.
Yeah, yeah. I think Final Fantasy II is another good example of this as well, because Final Fantasy II was very ambitious with its progression mechanics, but obviously that didn't take very long for people to be able to sort of exploit those and be able to manipulate them. And what the later versions of Final Fantasy II did is that they kept kind of the core of those progression mechanics, but they made it unnecessary to use those exploits. So, for example, a common trick in the old NES version of Final Fantasy II was to spend ages attacking your own party members in order to make their hit points go up. You don't need to do that anymore, because now, the more recent versions, they added a system where just based on the number of battles you've done, every few battles you have, your hit points just go up. So there's no need to do those exploits anymore. So it's the opportunity to sort of plug a few holes in the system as well.
That's cool.
And then, of course, you've got the legendary stories of things that just didn't work in the original games as well, like most of the spells in Final Fantasy I and the Ultima spell in Final Fantasy II. I love the story about Ultima in Final Fantasy II. Have you heard this one?
No, I don't know. I've actually never really played Final Fantasy II, so I don't.
So narratively, you go and get Ultima as like a significant narrative moment in Final Fantasy II. You go and get the Ultima Tome, which is trapped at the top of this big dungeon, and one of the sort of important side characters has to sort of sacrifice himself in order to open the door, and it's one of many, many, many deaths in that game. But yeah, you get the Ultima Tome, and you cast Ultima, and it's complete garbage. In the original NES version, this was because it was bugged, so it had like a hard cap of like 500 damage, and you're like doing 4-figure damage with just melee attacks at this point in the game. So it seems completely useless. They kind of fixed it in the PSP and GBA versions by making it based on a total of all your other magic skill levels. So like the more you've leveled up all of your magic, the more powerful Ultima is. So if you've bothered to grind and level all of the spells in the game, you can turn Ultima into the most powerful spell in the game in these later versions. But the Famicom version, it was completely broken. Apparently what happened was like I think it was Sakaguchi. He went to the programmer at the time and said, this spell is broken, it's not working properly, it's supposed to be the ultimate magic, but it's like crap. And the programmer just turned around to him and said, yeah, well, it's like a really ancient magic, and the people back then weren't as good at magic, so like the most ultimate magic from 500 years ago is not as good as the current magic we have now, and then he refused to fix it.
That's incredible. You can justify anything with lore.
It's such a good story. I love it. But yeah. So I mean, that's another opportunity for remakes to shine, though, is to sort of take these mechanics that, whether intentionally or unintentionally, didn't work properly in old versions and maybe didn't get caught until much later. They can fix those and make the game work properly.
Yeah, I mean, that's improvement is an important aspect of what we're talking about here. Of course, we want to celebrate and respect the originals, but the originals of these games are not flawless. Wonderful as they may be, they're not flawless. People are all like, things people are upset about FF7, about like not respecting the source material or whatever. Like, the original FF7 was barely intelligible. I played that game so many times, and I still don't understand like half of the story beats of the original FF7 because it's like the dialogue is like unintelligible. And like things are like super important things are like glossed over in like one sentence expositions and like never mentioned again.
Yeah,
it's like it's so difficult to really get the gist of the story in the original FF7 without like countless wikis and all the side games and like. And Remake is taking that and putting that in a coffee grinder and brewing up something better by extrapolating and drawing everything out to make sure we understand it. Not in a head beating you over the head like Navi from Zelda kind of way. Mm-hmm. Like there's no irritating, hey, listen. It's like it's a very natural and loving approach to making sure the story makes more sense than it ever did before.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about that is that I've seen more than one person say that they've gone back and started playing the original FF7 after finishing Remake, and they are appreciating 7 more because of it, because Remake provided them... Remake has made some changes, yes, but it's also provided additional context to things that happened in the original game, and they are thus getting a new appreciation for some of the things that went on in the original 7 by that new context.
There's definitely been moments that I've been playing 7 Remake where I've been like, oh, was that what that was supposed to mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's great. It's not only giving me something new and amazing to play, but it's literally enhancing my appreciation of something I already loved.
Yeah.
You can't beat that. Like, I have the Switch version of 7, and I can't wait to tinker with it again after I'm done with Remake.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I want to talk about the most controversial aspects of 7 because I know you haven't finished it yet, and I know that people are still very, very concerned about spoilers. So I think that might be something to return to at a later date. But I do want to acknowledge that some people have a bit of a problem with some of the things that they're doing. But I wrote an article recently on 7 that provides what I think this is all about. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, go and look at that article, because that says what I want to say about what we're going to do there. So we'll save this for the podcast so people don't sort of accidentally run into spoilers or anything.
Yeah.
But
we'll do a 7 Remake episode at some point once we both really just wrung it out for all it's worth.
Yeah,
we'll come back.
Definitely.
So what else did I have? Did you have any other titles that were interesting that you wanted to bring up?
I think those are the main sort of specific titles I wanted to bring up. The only other notes that I made were we sort of covered a few of these already, but I had sort of some specific challenges that developers face when they're remaking games.
Yeah.
And so the first of those I've put is nostalgia for the original version and the question of how true to stay to it. So I think that's something that's really raised its head with 7 Remake in particular, but a lot of other stuff over the years as well has doubtless run into this as well. So when you are remaking something that is so widely beloved and such an important part of popular culture, how true can you stay to it, or how true should you stay to it? Should you reimagine it? Should you do something different with it, or should you do a note-for-note remake? There's not really an easy answer to that. And I mean, ultimately it is in the hands of the creators, which is what a lot of people seem to forget. ultimately it is the creator's choice of how they handle their remake or their reimagining of something. But a lot of people, because they're so personally attached to things, they feel like they have a certain sense of ownership over it, and they feel like it should be a certain way. And so that's a big challenge that people have to face with remaking games. Which ties in with sort of the second point, which is resistance to new or changed content by the audience, which I guess I've already covered there. And then the final point is sort of marketing and target audience. So when you're making a remake for something, who do you aim it at and how do you do that? So Final Fantasy VII Remake is obviously marketed at people who liked Final Fantasy VII, but it's also a big budget game that is supposed to appeal to newcomers as well. So how do you aim it at those very disparate groups, and what are the considerations you have to bear in mind when you're trying to make something that, in theory, should appeal to a broad audience?
Was it Final Fantasy 15 where their ad campaign was like a Final Fantasy for like lifelong fans and newcomers?
Yeah, no. Final Fantasy 15 literally says that when you boot it up. So
yeah,
you start the game, and it says something along the lines of like a Final Fantasy for Final Fantasy fans or something like that. And then everyone went, "No, it isn't."
Yeah. Yeah, I just remember one of the most recent Square games, like that was specifically part of their marketing effort, was the statement this is something we've made for fans and newcomers alike, to like try to mince the two. But I just keep thinking how like that's easily applicable to 7 Remake, because I know people who've never played 7 who are interested in playing 7 Remake because it just looks like a friggin' cool game.
Yeah.
You know, like I've got a buddy at work who isn't really into Japanese role-playing games at all, but except Fire Emblem, he really likes Fire Emblem. And I was like, well, if you can deal with Fire Emblem, give this a try. Like you might like it. You know, it's cool because it gives people an opportunity who've never experienced it before. It's just as a new game. Like they don't care that it's a remake. It's just a new game.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we were talking about Ys. I didn't play Ys until like. The first time I ever played an Ys game was an import version of the PS2 port of the second one. That's the first time I ever played an Ys game.
I mean, my first Ys was the PC port of the PSP version, so yeah.
Yeah, so these are new games to people without the experience. But you know, like I would argue, my opinions on this kind of stuff are always fairly controversial. In that, like my argument is, to what extent do you change and remake? To what extent do you innovate on, or how faithful do you stay? I'm not a fan of stagnation. In any art form. So my big thing is, I would argue that remakes have a responsibility to distinguish themselves. That's what they are there for. That's why they exist.
Well, I mean, and this comes up a lot in film, doesn't it? In particular, it's like, why does this exist? And like, if you're not doing something new with it, then why does it exist?
Yeah, I would argue that's the other way around, right? Like a lot of people get mad when stuff doesn't hew close enough to the original, and I would say, then why bother making it? Yeah, the original exists. The original is there. Like it never goes away. Like if you want to play the original, play the original. You know, there are rare opportunities. Like, you know, in our last episode, when we talked about Psycho, we talked about the amazing work that the people behind the Switch ports of the Psycho games did when they literally had to rebuild Zero Gunner 2 from the ground up because most of the original code was gone. That's an amazing effort of historical preservation. That's a little bit different than what we're talking about here. Like slavish recreation like that has its place in terms of preservation when the original is inaccessible. Yeah. But if the original is fully accessible, and let's face it, man, you can get FF7 better than you've ever been able to get it before on modern consoles. You
can get FF7 on literally every currently available platform, including phones.
Yeah, with a revamped, improved translation, clearer visuals. So there's no reason to be pissy about anything 7 Remake does, because your beloved original is readily accessible. Just go play it. But I believe that remakes have a responsibility to justify their existence by having a unique identity, by making changes, by making improvements, and allowing new generations of programmers and creators to enhance the legacy of the original by putting their own spin on what it is.
Yeah. So, and I mean, like, the question of respecting the source material, when that comes up, you're not changing the source material. The source material exists. You're making a new game that happens to be based on the old one. I started playing Final Fantasy VII Remake, and it didn't take very long for me to think, this is a new game. This is a brand new game. Yeah. It's like, it was hitting some of the same story beats, yes. There were some familiar scenes that made me nostalgic, but I was playing a new game. It's a brand new game. It's as simple as that, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a tribute. Beyond the Buried in Me did an amazing cover of Motley Crue's "Kickstart My Heart." I like both of them. It's a different song, by different people with different ideas, different experiences, and it's there's no better way to respect source material than to celebrate it, and to do your best to bring your vision of it to bear. It's not disrespectful of the source material to make changes, to make improvements, to criticize, to evaluate, and to leave things out when necessary, because the source material exists to be respected. And what imitation may be the sincerest form of flattery, but I would argue that to take something, make it your own, and celebrate it in your own way is an even more sincere form of flattery.
Yeah.
I don't know, but that's how I feel about the whole thing. It's just, it's not only what I like, but it's what I expect and require from a remake, that it justify its existence by being different.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. So, like I say, I finished 7 Remake the other night, and I wasn't dissatisfied with any of it. I enjoyed it, and things about it that people are mad about, I was just like, it's a new game.
Yeah,
this is a new thing. These are new things. I'm excited to experience new stuff with these characters that I love so much.
Yeah. I mean, we have examples of both, right? Like one of the series I wrote about when I was kind of assembling my notes to have this discussion was, I even more than Final Fantasy, I like the Mana series, the Seiken Densetsu games, because I really like action RPGs. I'll take a top-down action RPG over a turn-based RPG any day. I just love the cadence and the rhythm, and I love that active exploration and action. So I love the Mana games. And at the end of this month, with the release of Trials of Mana, we will now have remakes available of every one of the original Mana trilogy. So the original Seiken Densetsu / Final Fantasy Adventure was actually remade on the Game Boy Advance as Sword of Mana.
And I forgot about that one.
It was a full, lovingly made, ground-up remake of the original Seiken Densetsu, using the graphic style that Brownie Brown had really honed over the years. So it looked a bit more like the Super Nintendo games and modern games from Brownie Brown, and it felt like the later Mana games in terms of the cadence of the combat, and it took out all the kind of, there were tenuous links to Final Fantasy in the original Seiken Densetsu, but they were just kind of thrown in there as marketing ploys.
Yeah.
They weren't really sincerely part of the narrative. So a lot of those were just removed to make this just a full-fledged Seiken Densetsu game with its own special identity. So it was a really cool example of how to do this, even just on a handheld. So they did that, and there was a lot of effort into this remake. But then, was it 2 or 3 years ago, we got the remake of Seiken Densetsu 2, Secret of Mana, and everyone hates it. I don't know anyone who liked that game. And one of the biggest complaints I had, besides some of the framiness and the performance issues, was it didn't do anything to justify its existence. So it's a lot of the same people who are I hear complaining about source material. We're well, this is didn't do anything, and it didn't add anything new. It was just, basically, the Seiken Densetsu remake is just a 3D creation beat for beat of the original. It's almost a skin. It's almost a skin. So not if there's anything wrong with that, but like people were angry that it didn't do any, because it was a slavish recreation, even to the point where it didn't improve the combat. Like it kept some of like the jankiness and like the rhythm problems that the original Secret of Mana's combat had. So a lot of modern players approaching it didn't like the game, who didn't have an experience with the original Secret of Mana, because they couldn't get their hands around the expectations of the combat and the timing. Yeah. Because it was just a beat for beat recreation, including the timing. So there we have an example of what happens when you do just recreate something with modern tech, beat for beat, programming bit for programming bit, timing. It's not well received because a modern audience can't access it. Yeah. And the people who think they're fans and they think they're longtime lovers of the original, they can play the original. They're bored of it because there's nothing new to experience.
Yeah. But then we've got the remake of Trials of Mana coming out, which everyone is super excited for.
Because it's taking the magic of Seiken Densetsu 3 and bringing it up to a third person angle with more modern combat sensibilities. And it's a great opportunity for fans of the original to explore their love of the original in a new way, while providing people who don't even know what the hell Seiken Densetsu 3 is with a beautiful new action RPG to experience.
Yeah.
So with the Mana series, we've had all sides of that coin. And we've seen which one is successful and which one generates buzz and positive attention. It's not slavish recreations of the original.
Yeah. Yeah, and the nice thing is with Trials of Mana, you can play both versions on the same platform.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah, you get the Mana collection, and it's got the original right there for you. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, those are the big series I kind of wanted to talk about. I mean, there's so many examples, right? Like, people love the Pokemon games. Yeah. We've had 3 generations now. The red-green generation, the gold-silver, and the ruby-sapphire generation have all been remade to the current handhelds with bells and whistles added that complement the expectations of the modern tech, with online capabilities, slightly expanded narratives, the ability to trade and bring those classic Pokemon into the new-gen games if you want to. So Nintendo's no stranger to this either. Yeah. And those are great examples to how to do it right. I'm no Resident Evil fan, but man, did people love that remake of 2 last year.
Yeah,
and
interestingly, people don't seem to be loving 3 quite as much for some reason.
Oh no, not as much.
No, I mean it's still been pretty positively received by a lot of people, but it doesn't seem to have quite the same level of fervor over it that 2 had.
I think generally in the Resident Evil community, people don't like 3 as much. Like it's not as loved as 2 and 4. Yeah. I don't know though. I just think that was another good example of how to really do it right. Because man, when that Resident Evil, the world stopped spinning when that Resident Evil 2 remake came out for like 3 weeks. It was like all anyone could talk about. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, that's all the titles I had to bring up, and kind of all the examples of kind of failures and successes that I've seen. We could literally just talk about Square remakes all day. You know, like I have I have notes here about the Matrix Software's 3D remakes of 3 and 4. Yeah, yeah. Which paved the way for Bravely Default to exist. So,
and then the completely separate remake of 4 for PSP.
yeah, which is a 2D remake, right? Using the engine from the 1 and 2 remake. Right? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so many examples out there of different ways, different approaches, and different successes and failures.
Good stuff. All right, I think that's probably a good place to cut it then, because we've gone on for nearly an hour on that. And like we say, there will almost certainly be a specific podcast on Final Fantasy VII Remake at some point, because there is a lot to talk about there. But we'll wait until we've both had plenty of time to digest that and enjoy it as well. Worth noting as well, there's some post-game stuff you can do after you've finished it as well, if you are interested in playing more of it as well. So I'm going to investigate some of that as well. There's apparently some bits and pieces you can only find in the hard mode. So they're called like manuscripts and stuff, so presumably they'll have little bits and pieces of lore in there as well. So I'm interested to see what those contain. But yeah, we'll have a discussion on that at some point when we've both spent some more time with that. But for now, would you like to tell people where to find you online?
Sure. As always, you can find my artwork at mrgilderpixels.com or also on Instagram at mrgilderpixels, where I share my completed pieces and work in progress shots.
Fabulous. And you can find me at MoeGamer.net, writing stuff about games most days. Currently, the Atelier Mega feature is ongoing, as I mentioned earlier. We're up to Atelier Iris 3 at the time of recording. Continue on and complementing that with all sorts of other bits and pieces that I've had time to sink my teeth into recently as well. So you can probably expect something about Snack World at some point in the near future as well, because I picked that up after Chris enthused about it on the last episode, and have been having a lovely time with that as well.
Next episode, I want to hear all about your experiences with it. 'Cause
yeah, definitely.
I love that game.
We should try and get some multiplayer time in as well, because I can see it being a ton of fun in co-op. So, but yeah, we'll save that for next time. You can also find an audio version of this podcast over on SoundCloud if you're watching on YouTube, and a video version on YouTube if you're listening on SoundCloud. Check MoeGamer.net for various links to social media and that sort of thing. And just remains for us to say, as always, thank you very much for watching and or listening, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please help out the channel by leaving a like or a comment and subscribing. Be sure to check out MoeGamer.net for new articles on Japanese and Japanese-inspired video games, new and old, every weekday. Every month, MoeGamer features an in-depth exploration of an individual game or series as its cover game, so be sure to check the archives to see if your favourite has had a deep dive yet. If you'd like to support the site directly, please consider becoming a patron or buy me a coffee. You can find links to do both down in the video description. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.